Hi folks, Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz in Chicago with Public Affairs TV. And Jeff, before we start, I want to ask the public, would you give us a thumbs up, like the show, because it helps to build our YouTube audience, even though we are also seen on cable around the state of Illinois. And Jeff, if we don't get more likes and views, we're going to have to start talking about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. So do give us your thumbs up. And Jeff, we have a lot to talk about, so we'll get to that. The government is in a shutdown, as everyone knows. It is now a record shutdown. Never before has it been this long. And we'll be discussing it in some depth here, folks, to get to it. But let's first hear a little bit about what some of the senators are saying. We got first a comment by Rick Scott, and then we'll play a little bit from Senator Schumer.
They don't care that their actions are stopping our troops, Capitol Police, federal law enforcement, air traffic controllers from getting their paychecks. They don't care that they're causing chaos and delays at our airports, or that 42 million people rely on SNAP benefits who can't put food on the table. Little kids are worried about getting a dinner tonight. And it's because the Democrats have decided to shut down our government. So I represent the people of Florida and Americans across this country who are sick and tired of these political games. What we ought to be doing is feed our families, pay the people who are working their tail off, and open our government.
I think the shutdown, Terry, was not helpful to President Trump. He's watching the polls. He thought it was working for him. It wasn't. They expect this president to take charge. And if something's going wrong, it's inevitably going to be the president who's blamed. And that's what was happening here. So I think it was a mistake from the beginning. He should have just taken charge and said, look, let's just sit down and talk. You got to talk. Let's get this thing done and let's move ahead. And he should have made them very transparent what his offer was. And if it was going to be misrepresented by the media, we'll just say it again and again. Looking back is always easy, but that would have been a much better strategy than letting this thing drag on for 35 days. And important thing, now is the time. Get the damn thing over, make your offer, get that out in the media and argue it. Correct it. What's done is
obviously, I'll discuss that further, but I want to make sure before we lose too much time after Senator Scott, let's hear what Chuck Schumer had to say just this morning.
Negotiations, it's been long enough. Look, if Republicans were smart, they would get the message after Tuesday that their do-nothing strategy isn't working. Even Donald Trump knows Americans hold Republicans responsible for this mess.
So that was Schumer saying, quoting some of the things he ended up pointing out that what the president said was that the shutdown was a big factor, a negative factor for Republicans in the elections. Like everything, that's debatable. I had thought, frankly, that the shutdown might hurt the Democrats. I would also say to what you just said, that the president should have just said, let's sit down and have a discussion. I think this idea of using the shutdown as blackmail, that we're going to hold the nation hostage until you do what we want, it's just not the way the government works. The government is supposed to be open. You're not supposed to be using funding the government as leverage to get your way when you lose elections. The Democrats lost the House, they lost the Senate, they lost the presidency last November, and now the Republicans are in charge. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't talk and negotiate, but the Democrat tactic here, and it's the Democrats in the Senate, because the funding bill's already passed the House of Representatives. So it's in the Senate, and because they have the filibuster in the Senate, it takes 60 votes. There are only 53 Republicans, and Senator Rand Paul is not voting. He's voting against this for his own reasons. So, but we do have Senator Angus King of Maine and one other senator, maybe John Fetterman. Two Democrats are voting with the Republicans. So, I think it's time. It is unreasonable for the Senate Democrats to be demanding that we fund Obamacare, and when one of the crises in funding is the growth of the national debt right now, and they're asking to spend $1.5 trillion that more, when what we really need to be doing is what Doge was doing, is going through and finding how we can cut some government spending.
So the main thing to add here that's absent from our discussion and Schumer's discussion is Schumer was being cowed on this. The progressive left was coming after him. They didn't like the way he's been handling things going back to the last election, not standing up, not fight, fight, fight like Trump, fight, fight, fight. So he was trying to assert himself to ward off a primary challenge in a few years from AOC. This was his attempt to start looking tough. That's what it was about. Nobody said it. He didn't say it, so I just did. And the important thing, say it again. And the important thing is to articulate what they want and why that's wrong and why the Republicans think they're right. That's it. Just put it out there. And if you think the media is not representing it, buy some time. Go over the heads of the media. Make sure that statement, at least that position, that argument gets out there. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
I think it's been interesting that a lot, because we've been through this a number of times. When I was working in Washington covering the Congress, we had, when Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton was in the White House, we had a number of shutdowns, and they seemed to go long. They didn't go as long as this one. This one's the record. But it's interesting now that I think a lot of people are just ignoring this. They're going about their jobs, their days, and they're not paying attention, and they just look at this with disdain. But because this has gone so long, it's now having an impact where it will impact families, especially as Thanksgiving. And all that travel is only about 3 weeks away now. And here the FAA just came out recently with this statement saying that currently 50% of major air traffic control facilities are experiencing staffing shortages, and nearly 90% of air traffic controllers are now out at New York area facility. That is shocking, Jeff. That 90%, which means you got 10% of the people on the job, certainly doesn't make me comfortable to go out and say, hey, let's go to New York and do anything there, conduct business, go there for vacation or whatever. If there are any fatalities of airliners, this is going to explode, I would say, just in the public's ire against both parties for this going on and for the gamesmanship being used for political purposes instead of just running the government in a responsible way, as they both should be.
Well, yeah, the statistic that is being thrown out, I haven't seen the 90% of New York shutdown in their airport facilities and so forth. But what I have seen is starting this week, there's going to be in the 40 major utilization airport facilities, transit, et cetera, airplane transit. In the top 40, there may be a 10% cutback in cancellations and delays. So that's going to start hitting a large number of travelers as we approach Thanksgiving and in the run up to that, and in the business and the flow. It's time, folks. It's time for the president to say, okay, I'm ready. Let's talk. Here's my offer. What's yours?
That's it. Go ahead. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm just saying, so now's the time, but it's got to be a clear, focused, this is what the argument is about. This is the waste. I think this will be the position of Donald Trump. This is the waste and inefficiency that the Democrats want. We want less waste and inefficiency. Here's our offer. What's yours? And we can resolve this today.
Before we close, I'll just say the president has also been largely operating at full speed ahead while this has been going on. He's been blowing up drug boats in the Caribbean. He was working on getting the Middle East peace agreement done between Hamas and Israel. He just today announced that he has a deal with two Eli Lilly and another pharmaceutical company that was just happening right before we started taping to lower the anti-fat drugs, for lack of a better term, and they've agreed to drop the cost of those drugs dramatically. So you'll be hearing more about that. It just goes to show the point is the White House is operating still on a whole range of issues, but obviously now it's starting to be impacted. And unless you have something else, I want to move on to one of the other big stories, obviously, of this week. And I started to say, we're taping this on Thursday, November the 6th, just to put this in context. Some people think that the shutdown may end next week, but we'll have to see what happens. What did happen this week is there was the election on Tuesday, again, 2 days before we tape this, and one of the big results that everyone is going to be looking at is the election of Mamdani in New York City, who handily won with 50% of the votes, even though he is running against the former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, and Curtis Sliwa, who is a Republican, and Republicans are an endangered species in New York. But Jeff, I wonder, will now Mamdani and whatever happens in New York City, is that going to be the new brand for the Democrat Party nationwide? Or will that be segregated, or is that going to come to harm the Democrat Party? What is your take on that?
Well, it's certainly going to be a harm. New York is one of the three major cities in the country. It's New York, it's LA, and Chicago. Chicago has already seen the damage of having Brandon Johnson as its mayor. If he ain't a communist, he's pretty close to a socialist. He's not efficient, he's not good. Now we're going to find out when a bona fide, one thing Mamdani made clear is he's not running from the label of socialist. He's embracing it. A quarter of the million people who voted for him, of those voters, self-identify as socialists. This is in the city, which is the capital, which is the center of capitalism, which has the New York Stock Exchange. And now we'll face a challenge from having a stock exchange in Dallas. Look, folks, if New York wants to slide downhill and wants to chase out its millionaires, chase out its success, that's fine. There are substitutes in Miami, in Dallas, in Texas, in Florida, in the free states, so to speak. So if New York wants to see this go worse and worse, just embrace Mamdani.
Mamdani. That's
going
to tell if you do it.
Mamdani. Yeah, just embrace that, folks, and make this the pedigree of the Democratic Party. Make it.
To your point, I wanted to insert before I forget it that someone just pointed out that the top 1% of taxpayers in New York City pay 40% of all the taxes. If those people leave, and you don't have to lose all of them, if you just start getting any of those people who are the big taxpayers in New York City, if they leave, it will destroy the city budget. The other thing that was pointed out, and I thought it was an effective argument by Andrew Cuomo, who again, as the governor, and he was a two-term governor, I think he was, knows how the state runs, and he was pointing out a lot of what Mamdani wants to do is impossible because he doesn't control the buses, and he can't do a number of the things unless he gets permission from the governor of New York. And a lot of the money that comes into New York would be federal dollars, and Donald Trump might say, unless you change your ways here, I'm not going to be sending you federal money just to have it wasted on your socialist policies. So Mamdani may have won the election. He may also live to see that he regrets putting himself in this position. This thing could just blow up very quickly once he becomes the mayor of New York City after the first of the year.
Terry, the more important thing for Illinois, because we are the Illinois, you are the Illinois Channel, the more important thing, the more important election, more important than New York City, is the New Jersey election, because there you had a case where the closest thing to Illinois high taxes, that would be New Jersey high taxes. And that has been true for at least the last 8 years and longer. And for the last 8 years, the New Jersey has had a Democratic mayor there, Phil Murphy. They had two-term
A
limited.
Democratic governor.
So
you said mayor. A Democratic governor.
You're right. Thank you for the correction. A Democratic governor, Phil Murphy. The important thing, he was term limited. We didn't hear anything about him. He was the guy who should have been to blame. If you have high taxes and you have people fleeing the state, and if you have low growth, and if you have a lot of problems in New Jersey, well, it should have been Phil Murphy and the Democratic Party. And in Illinois, the difference is J.B. Pritzker has been here for 8 years. And the Republicans say he's failed on schools, failed on taxes, failed on growth. But the difference between New Jersey and Illinois is that he is on the ballot. J.B. Pritzker is on the ballot. Phil Murphy wasn't. So if there's an election, as there is here, and Darren Bailey and Ted Dabrowski and James Mendrick and Max Solomon and Mark Heidner are all challenging Pritzker, Pritzker has to answer. He's the guy, unless he's going to resign as soon as he's resigned before he gets elected. And nobody's pointed this out. And this was the
Well,
problem
the other thing is,
with the New Jersey election.
as Governor Pritzker is running for another term, that will be his third term, should he be elected. No one has had a third term since Big Jim Thompson was serving 3 terms before, just before Governor Edgar then was elected back in 1994. So, or was it 1990? Now I've lost track. He might have been reelected
Well,
in
more
94.
important than the history lesson, Terry, more important than the history lesson is just a reminder again. The issues in Illinois are high taxes, failed public schools, crime, non-existent job growth, poor economic climate, and Illinois population growth.
But Jeff,
to the
those
extent it
were
occurs.
the issues, as we're talking about New Jersey, those were the issues. And I think the Republicans thought that they might have their candidate win there in New Jersey.
But he was a poor messenger.
He didn't, it seemed like he was doing a good campaign, but he didn't come anywhere near as close as what had been predicted by some of the polling. But my larger point is not about that, him. The point is, the issues in New Jersey where the Republican lost are the same issues here in Illinois, is what you're just pointing out. High property taxes, crime, bad schools, and what has Governor Pritzker done here? That should be on the table, and what's being discussed as we get into the gubernatorial election.
But if Jack, whatever his name was,
Citrielli,
yeah, whatever his name, if he did a poor job, if he was, as people say, a poor candidate, this is his third loss, and he was not articulating the message, then the question for Illinois and the Illinois GOP is Ted Dabrowski the right messenger? Is Mark Heidner the right messenger? Is Darren Bailey the right messenger? Because who can articulate this message of the failed schools? Why do they fail? And more importantly, what's the solution? Why did we have only 15,000 new jobs when they had over 1 million in the same 7-year period in Texas and in Florida? Why? What do we do differently? Who can articulate it? Can Bailey do that? He lost by 13 points before. Can Ted Dabrowski do that? That's the question, Terry. Who is the right messenger?
Well, by the way, I'm sure you as well as me, we send our deepest sympathies to Darren Bailey for his son and daughter-in-law, and some of his grandchildren were killed in a helicopter crash recently. So that is not the way you want to get your name back in.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, because we certainly, both of us and the Illinois Channel community, send their deepest sympathies to the Bailey family. It's a tragic event, and nobody can imagine. And the only thing we can say is we hope and we're sure that the Baileys will realize they have the support and the love of the people of this. But now they must enter a campaign, and that's going to be a hard-hitting campaign, no holds barred. And I think both Bailey and Dabrowski and Heidner and others, maybe.
I don't think that's going to have an impact on the campaign. But of course, it's a horrible tragedy. I will say that when you look at Darren Bailey, who was the Republican nominee 4 years ago, I think the facts show that he didn't play well in upstate. His style is different. I mean, this sounds trivial, but the fact that he's wearing like a flat top haircut, that he has a twang in his voice, that just his personal style is not at all what you see in Chicago or the Chicago suburbs, and that's where the vast majority of the voters are. So Ted Dabrowski is a Chicagoan. Ted Dabrowski is not only Polish, He helped the Polish government when they were transitioning from communism to a free market economy, and they did it very successfully. So with all the Polish voters in Chicagoland, that gives him somewhat of a boost up. But Jeff, you know, the other thing that happened this week, unless you wanted to add more, I wanted to talk about what went on in the veto session here.
Before we do that, let me just note, as we talk, you mentioned Ted is based in Chicago. That's where his residence is. But as we speak, he is on a 13 county tour of downstate, and he's got more coming up. So Ted truly wants to be and will be a candidate of North and South, of upstate and downstate. And so if Bailey wants to do that, he's going to have to play in upstate as well as downstate. He can't, as he seems to suggest, he'll send Aaron Del Mar, his light gov candidate from Cook County there, because guess what? People vote for somebody to be governor. The light gov candidate is there, but it's almost like the VP. Until recently, the VP didn't play a major role, but until ever, the light gov has not played a major role.
Here's something that could impact the governor's race, and it's what happened just in the legislature. Two things that were big. One, they passed a power bill that takes the caps off of how much your electric bill can go up at the municipal level, because it used to be capped, you could only raise it so much. The legislature just voted to remove those caps. And what is going on behind the scenes that a lot of people haven't focused on, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, we know about AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence operates in data centers. And the governor has been, and I think to his credit, a proponent of data centers in Illinois. But the thing that people may not know is that data centers suck up an enormous amount of electrical power, and just one data center can use as much electricity in a year as the city of Springfield and surrounding areas. So we have to increase the amount of electricity. The Democrats are woe to go back to using coal, and they don't like to use natural gas, even though it's reliable, much cheaper than some of the other alternatives, and you know, is the kind of thing you ought to have producing the electricity. Fossil fuels cannot be replaced in the near term. But to the extent the Democrats in the legislature think we should be going to wind and solar, this is going to be driving our electric rates up, not just for homeowners, but for businesses. And so that's going to have an impact. The other thing is they voted on a Chicago mass transit funding system, which I think could have a whole lot of people downstate PO'd at the Democrats, the Chicago Democrats, and the machine up there, because what that is doing, you've taken a look at some of the details. I have a graphic I could put up while you want to discuss that, but let's take a look at just that, because I think this did not get the coverage because it happened in the dark of night. But Jeff, as you look at this, what is it that you see that happened here?
Veto session, or maybe maybe the day before. And before they had something completely different. The governor had not been involved. He sort of let it fail on its own weight, and it did. And then he came forth with this, and this passed. So without discussion, without debate, without study, without analysis. I thought we just had a no kings
Well, let's look at what some of this says here.
Day.
I mean, the funding packages uses the state's motor fuel taxes to fund mass transit instead of using the money from for the road fund. It goes to mass transit. That's okay under the state amendment that passed about 10 years ago. Another $500 million comes from 1/4% of the RTA, Regional Transit Authority sales tax increase. $200 million or so comes from annual interest on the road fund to fund the transit capital projects. But let's go to that bottom one here. This is the thing. 85% of the motor fuel sales tax will go to northeastern Illinois, in other words, Chicago and the suburbs, and 15% to downstate of the road fund interest goes to the RTA. So you're kind of screwing, for lack of a better word, the people downstate. And as we look at this, who is this quote from, Jeff, that you got this statement from?
That's from Travis Weaver, state rep from the Peoria area. He's a major critic of this legislation, and clearly they've shifted, which was this historical ratio of the
Let me
road
read
funds
this if
being
I might
split
just
between.
quickly. So historically, the road fund split has been 55% downstate, 45% for Chicagoland. Now it's going to be 85% Chicagoland and 15% downstate, where the vast majority of the roads are. The representative goes on to say, I would guess offhand 90% of the roads in Illinois are downstate districts like my own, and yet we are only getting 15% of the road fund from the sales tax. So there you go. That is the reason why a lot of people downstate, Democrats as well as some Republicans, might say, hang on, guys, we may vote Democrat, but you're kind of really sticking it to the downstate people when you're going to be taking 85% of the funds, where we used to get 55%, now we're going to get 15%.
And taking a big picture view, what Weaver said about this, Governor Pritzker said, and said recently in the last day or two, that Dems win when they focus on affordability, talking about the election, the general elections, national elections we were just talking about, or
Well,
elections
and in New York, that was
in
the
New
big
Jersey.
issue, right? Affordability,
Right.
that Mamdani
Affordability.
won
So
on.
New York and New Jersey and so forth. Well, Weaver said, Democrats just took what was viewed as a $200 million problem, which remember we heard it was a $770 million going off the cliff. That house was reduced to $200 million. So they took a $200 million problem and threw $2.5 million at it. I don't know how that creates affordability and how that, and this is the point. This is the point. You just a slight correction when you were talking about energy. You didn't mention nuclear, which Illinois
Right.
has, and they've not advanced to the new kinds of nuclear, and it's just completely not a part of their picture. And the reason why this
Small
can happen
nuclear,
is because we
nuclear
don't do
plants.
legislation as we used to, where there would be discussion, there would be these things would come out with enough time, and there would be debate. Now we have a king. It's called King Pritzker. Pritzker puts it out there, and 20 minutes later, it's passed. And so, if you don't like something,
Yeah,
tough.
they
What do
talk
you do
about
about
Trump being a king, but here, what happened? The legislature was passing this at like 4, they were up until 4 in the morning passing this, where no one could be awake to see what they were doing. No, very little coverage of this. And so, Jeff, we're going to have to see when the electric bill starts going up and crushing, as the property taxes in Illinois are already crushing retirees, and retirees vote. Let's see what happens when their electric bills go up and they can't run their air conditioners in the summer. And then let's see what happens when their roads that their kids are riding school buses on are going across potholes, because downstate's only getting 15% of the road fund.
So now is the time, Terry.
We got about 1 minute, by the way.
Now it's time for governor candidates to speak up, to speak out, to go to forums, to debate with each other, and see who can talk about how do you get taxes down. How do you fix schools so kids can read and do math with proficiency? How do you get crime down? How do you have job growth?
And when is the
We
state
need to
going to
hear
start
that debate.
cutting costs instead of adding cost? You know, they're just shuffling the chairs on the Titanic instead of saying, do we need this program? Let's cut it. Do we need that program? Let's cut it. Let's start better using the funds we have. That's what a manager should be doing.
The word is reform. Illinois needs reform. Chicago needs reform. This transit bill doesn't have anything about dealing with the major issue of transit, high crime. And the rate of usage of passenger miles on rapid transit, mass transit, it's down by 50%. And yet we're putting more money into it. How can that be? When usage is down, we spend more.
Okay, we got it.
and
We
they
got to
call
wrap
this
up.
a
But folks,
thoughtful
we
policy.
said off the top, give us a thumbs up. Share these videos if you want people to hear what's really going on, because we're not just covering the standard fluff that it so often makes the news. But for now, we'll see you next week. Jeff, I'll give you the last word.
All right. Look forward to talking further next week as we cover some of the things we didn't have a chance to get to this week.
All right, take care.